But I wanted to come here, and it was important for me to be here. Not just because Sean is my friend and a good guy and working so hard, but it is so critical that not just in Howard County, and not just for Howard County, but for our world and our future, we take time to preserve our history, to tell the story of the foundation upon which we were built, so that current and future generations know where we've been, and it helps them chart a course for where we're going. And I especially wanted to be here to hear my friend. You see, as a dad of two girls, it is important that I point them to not just the first woman county executive in Howard County, but the first woman county executive in Maryland. As an example that they can always break any barriers and overcome any obstacles. But even more importantly, I wanted to come here because, yes, it is important for young girls and women to know about Liz and to hear about Liz. But what many of us don't understand until we actually are in that moment, that anytime someone breaks a barrier, they not only break barriers for people like them, but they send a message that barriers can be broken. And when I was thinking about running for county executive, there were people who told me, honestly, that Howard County would never elect a black county executive. I know, isn't it laughing? And one of the things that I held on to was, I'm sure there were some people who thought that Howard County would never elect a woman county executive. And if they were wrong about that, maybe they were wrong about that. And that also sends a message when I think about anyone who is in the minority or who is discounted. A person with a disability, an older adult, an Asian person, someone of Hispanic heritage, Muslim, Jew, any of the descriptors that help create this beautiful tapestry of a life. People like Liz Bobo help teach us all that barriers can be broken. So without further ado, please put your hands together for your friend, my friend, our former county executive and delegate and council member, Liz Bobo.
Looking forward to this very much. I've had a good time going back through some records to remind me of some things that I did with people like Grace Kabovsik, who was one of my main leads when I was county executive. And it's surprising the number of things that have come back up that I have sort of lost track of. And I don't have enough time to talk about all the things I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to start with something that is not about me and the county executive, but it's about two people from the NAACP here. Willie Flowers, who's the president. Bessie Brittany, I'm not sure what your title is, Bessie, but who is already friend. And Willie is actually helping me unravel the threads of the history of my mother's father's family in Calvert County back in the early 1700s. It was a family of Huguenots, and in introducing me to the president of the NAACP in Calvert County, Willie is putting me in touch with learning some things about my mother's family that I did not know. I have no idea if that would ever lead to interracial marriage. I have no idea. I don't care if it does or it doesn't. What I want to do is get more information about the family, and it's very, very interesting. Lloyd and I went down there one day, I forget what Lloyd's my husband, he's here, went down to service there, I forget what the occasion was. And we walked down, I have a hard time, I'm not a crier, I don't cry very often, but I have a hard time telling this story. We went down and stood on the dock of the Patuxent River down in Calvert County. And there was a black minister there who sang the song of people, you know, getting on the boats and making an escape. And my mother's father's family came there from France, and they were tobacco farmers. And she grew up, and they were one of the families that had treated their slaves, and yes, they had slaves, I have that research now, and they had treated their slaves very well, and the slaves stayed on after the war. And as Willie knows, because he's been talking with me about it, as the family dwindled and more male members of the family moved up to Baltimore, and there were no more Minettes left in Calvert County, they left the farm to the slaves and their descendants. And we have found that farm. When my mother was still living, we went down and visited. And it's, my daughter Chris is here, Chris and John, otherwise better known to everyone now as Zach's parents. And oh my gosh, and Julia's here. Hi, Julia and Chad, Zach's sister Julia, and her fiance here, who may wish I hadn't called that attention to you. So it's, I'm just absolutely fascinated with this. My mom died at the age of 95, and I know that at some level, you know, there's an awareness out there of what I'm learning about the family, and I'm so grateful to Willie for putting me in touch with those people. And I have no idea where all the research is going to go, but it's very interesting to me, and I think cannot lead to anything other than positive outcomes, whatever it is we learn. So in addition to that long attention to that issue, I want to get into starting to run through what I've been doing since I left public office. I know one thing I've done. I've lost my ability to estimate the amount of time it takes to cover certain things. So there's no way. I had it down pretty good. I always have spoken pretty much off the cuff and not from written speeches, but I am going to run through a few things that I'm spending my time on now, and then I'm going to go to some historic preservation issues in the Calvert County that we worked on as the county executive. All kinds of friends here who helped to get me elected and have been dear friends all my life here in Columbia. So I grew up in Baltimore, Evanston Village area, Route 40. Went to a Catholic elementary school and to a girls' Catholic high school. Then I went to College Park to get a degree in literature. I think it's so funny that I chose literature. I'm so glad I chose literature because I love it. But it never occurred to me, having grown up in a family with barely 2 cents to rub together, because my father got Parkinson's disease when I was 2 years old. So I was accustomed to having very little money, and yet it never occurred to me to major in something that I could use to make a living. And I'm so grateful it didn't occur to me. So, and then later on, after I was married, and Chris and her brother grew up in the Columbia Hills community off of where Route 100 goes nearby now, off of Route 29. And I am so grateful that I have that background in literature. So my former husband and I moved here, and my son was born shortly after that. And the first issue that I got involved in the county was the Howard County General Hospital. And the hospital had been built, the 60-bed hospital that Jim Rouse built. And Then it appeared to dawn on some other people in the healthcare industry and business that this would be a very fruitful place to open an institution. So 2 other hospitals wanted to build here at the same time. One would have been built, we would not be in this building. It would be on the land that we're sitting on right now, we're standing on right now. And that was by the Lutheran Hospital in Baltimore City. A very good group, very good hospital that they wanted to build here. And then out on, off of 29, north of 29, I can't remember the name of the assisted living place. I think it's assisted living run by Bon Secours. Is it a Bon Secours? Well, I was born in Bon Secours Hospital, and they wanted also to open a hospital. And so we would have had 3 fledgling hospitals here in Howard County, and I'm not sure, I knew nothing about health planning, but I could count, and I did know, that this was not going to work. So I got involved with a friend who was then the first head of the Department of Citizen Services in Howard County by the name of Harriet Lancaster. Some of you, I'm sure, remember her as an early Colombian. And she and I are still friends. Lloyd and I are going to be going down to Florida to visit with her and her husband soon. And she got the Department of Citizen Services started in Howard County under Ed Cochran, not under me, but under Ed Cochran, and got it off to a great start, I might say. So all of those things from my past family that now are crisscrossed into my public policy kind of life are very good memories for me. So I think what I want to do now is to shift to the emphasis we placed on historic preservation when I became county executive. We had very few buildings that were on the historic register then. And we got underway, and we had tremendous help from the Howard County Historical Society. I'm sorry to say I can't remember who the officers were at the time. I had intended to look it up before this moment, and I never got around to it. But they were very, very helpful. And we had several historic preservation projects that we worked on in that term. I could say my first term as county executive, but it was my first and only term. I did not succeed in my re-election bid, which is okay. I took a lot of chances when I was county executive, and I don't regret it. If I had to do over again, I'd take chances again. So we had a new planning director by the name of Uri Avon, who, Grace, you'll be happy to hear, was at our house a couple weeks. He's not here. He is not here. Uri, hey, hi. You don't want to, you're shy. Well, I'm so happy you're here, because all of these things I'm going to run through were Uri's ideas. And we created, one of the first things we did was to contribute county money. The Historical Society at the time was trying to restore the steeple in the building where your offices are. And we were not contributing. And Uri said, this is crazy. We've got to put some county money into this. So we did that and helped that project get underway. Then there was the old firehouse off of Main Street, which we decided to make a priority. And I had a real soft spot for that firehouse because it never occurred to me until the fire professional people explained that if you see that old firehouse, it's on a very steep hill. And the reason for that was so that the horses could get a running start. They were horse pulled. Yeah, so I always loved that. And I got that from my mother. And so we, the bell had been lost to that firehouse. And I don't know who did it, but someone, I think instigated by Uri and Planning and Zoning, went out and they found the bell that had hung in the firehouse many years before, and that bell is there now. There was also a project in the capital budget my first year in office. And no, there had been a project in the capital budget since the beginning of eternity, I believe, to restore the Patapsco Female Institute, which of course would have been an enormous project. And when I came in as county executive, I got ready to do what Ed Cochran had done for 4 years before me and whoever was before him, to say, we can't handle this, we're going to put it off. And Uri said, look, there's a new attention being paid to, what was it called, stabilization of historic ruins. So based on his bringing that to our attention and bringing a specialist in, that's why we can go and watch Shakespeare in the park during the summer, because we restored that place instead of, letting it sit there and decay or going into debt till the next millennium to restore it. Let's see, what else? Waverly, that was a specialty of, that was a special pet of Senator Clark's. Is Martha here? Yeah. Senator Clark was one of my biggest mentors in all of my political life. He was wonderful to me, including after I lost my re-election bid, which was really a surprise to everyone, including me. An anti-incumbent wave came through. And I remember he called me up. There was going to be the state Democratic dinner was coming up. And he called, and your mom had already left this earth. And he said, would you go to the historic dinner with me? So the two of us went together, which was just such a wonderful thing for him to do, because it broke the ice, to be there with me. And I didn't know that I'd go, whether I'd ever run for office again or not. But anyway, he played a big, big role in what our priorities were. And even surpassing historic preservation was what he did with ag preservation. And we took the lead in the country, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, about how to preserve agricultural land. So I can't remember the term for the what we did in ag preservation, but we, help me, Uri, I need your help. Come on, no, I'm telling the truth. Pardon me?
Zero coupon bond purchase.
Zero coupon bond purchase. That was how we went about buying an interest in the farmland so that the farmers could continue to go on with their life. They could farm more if they wanted, or it could be held for development further down the line instead of all this. In 1 year, I have the notes here, but I'm not going to be able to find them. The number of residential units that was going up per year was just astronomical. And there was no way that we could have continued to handle that. So farmland preservation, went very well with that. So Senator Clark wanted to have Waverly held in good shape, and so we did that. I remember the first party held there was a staff party on Christmas Eve. We had a good time. And then there was the Pfeiffer Schoolhouse, where we, and particularly the Department of Planning, assisted students from Hammond Middle School in saving the one-room schoolhouse from demolition by relocating it to county parkland in the middle Patuxent Valley. Troy Hill, including the mansion, was acquired and saved from industrial development during the 4-year term. Again, with Uri, and I've got to be fair here, I've got to also give credit to the head of Public Works, Jim Irvin, who was also very much involved in that. So, and then the Ellicott City Colored School that's on Main Street, that really goes ahead to when I had gone to the state legislature and put in a bond bill to enable us to do that. So there was a lot that was done in the area of historic preservation, and I'm so glad that we did it, because I think a lot of those buildings, would not be there now. So I want to tell a story that's not about a particular issue. And it's a story about the first Big Seven meeting I went to. The Big Seven were the group of county executives at the mayor of Baltimore, and then Howard County, Harford County, Anne Arundel County, help me, Montgomery, Prince George's.
Montgomery.
No, Carroll was not a charter government. Baltimore County, thank you. So they had regular meetings, and I went to my first meeting. It was in Baltimore. And I had a county car, which surprised me. I didn't know that I was going to get a county car, and it was some sort of what was it, Lloyd, and like a 5-6-year-old Chrysler or whatever it was. But I was a good driver, and I was very comfortable driving into Baltimore City by myself at night. And this was a nighttime meeting, very near Mount Vernon Square. I can't remember the name of the hotel. But I drove in and parked and went into the meeting. And I guess about half of the guys were there before me, and then half came after me. And I found myself putting them at ease about the fact that, that there was a woman in the group. And we had a good time. It turned out to be a very pleasant evening. I was very comfortable. I think they were very comfortable. So after finishing the meeting and there wasn't really a meeting, but the meal and the conversation, we all went out to get on the elevator and go downstairs to get our cars. So I didn't know until, hey Martha, my niece is here. Hi. Until we got down there, and all of the cars, here came one car driven by a paid driver. And one of the executives got in and drove off. Another car comes around, driven by a paid driver. The guy gets in, and Judy knows this, I know you know this story. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through it alive without dying of laughter. But anyway, so maybe 3 of the executives had gotten in these cars and left with drivers. And then here came my car, which was considerably older. I mean, the car had been taken care of, but it was, in its heyday, it wasn't a fancy car. So this guy, one of the hotel employees, brought the car around. And I walked around, and he opened the door for me and held it, and I got in the car. And did not realize that he had activated something. Maybe it was the emergency brake, I don't know. But I turned the key, and the car lurched. And the executives lining up on the curb all stepped back. I'm just looking straight ahead. So then the guy came back, and he was going to help me with it. Help me, honey. I can't remember what very intellectually skilled thing I did after that. Oh my God. So he said, all you have to do is flip that, and he pointed to something. So I did what I thought he wanted me to do. And the next thing I know, the hood went up. I'm not kid you not. And it hung there for an interminable amount of Meanwhile, I'm just as if I had horse blind or something, looking straight ahead. And then I was able to, the guy came around with something that, he came around and slammed the hood down, and then reached in and released the emergency brake, and went back and stood with the guys who were in there. And I, without looking, to the right or the left, I give them credit. Not one of them ever mentioned it. Only in my wildest dreams imagine the time they must have had. And I turned out to be, I will say this with as much honest modesty as I can muster. I could hold my own with those guys. I mean, I understood the public policy. I knew what I wanted to do. So anyway, I just wanted to, I haven't told that story publicly. It might be good for some of the residents of Howard County to realize that I think they probably can trust that their present county executive is not going to distinguish himself in the same way that I did there. So, now I'm gonna get more serious. I didn't know where it was going to be, and there was much, much more than planning and zoning to the administration. We had wonderful department heads. We had Harriet Lancaster in Citizen Services, Jim Irvin in Public Works, Dick Shaw in Fire and Rescue, Cheney in the police department, just wonderful, wonderful people. But most of the public policy that we did, that was controversial, and that was also cutting edge, was done by Uri in planning and zoning. So and I'm just thrilled that he came here. And not knowing that you were going to be here, I'm going to read something from a paper that you gave me before Lloyd and I took off to Mexico for a month, but when I knew I was going to be coming here tonight. So he says, and it's not too long to read. These are some personal recollections of planning activities in Howard County during this 4-year period. Liz Bobo took office after 4 years of surging growth, with Howard the fastest growing county in the state. Residential permits had quadrupled between 1980, about 1,000 units a year, and 1986, 4,000 a year. Unlike its neighbors, Montgomery, Baltimore, Anne Arundel counties, Howard had no plans or tools to address the impacts of this accelerating growth on the environment, roads, schools, parks, and general infrastructure, and on government's capacity to cope. While Columbia had been absorbing much of the growth over the past 15 years, it was rapidly spreading beyond Columbia's borders throughout the county, especially in the steeper terrain around Ellicott City, along the Patapsco, and into the rural west on large lots. With the executive support, the new planning director initiated a series of planning and regulatory measures to address this growth challenge between 1987 and 1990. And that was what really put me on a negative list for an awful lot of people in the building industry. And I can understand how that would be difficult for them. You know, they weren't going to be able to do what they wanted to do. They weren't going to be able to make the size profits they were going to be making. But it was just so clear. I was stunned to find out how serious it was. And I had been on the county council. But so at any rate, this is what we did. And basic environmental protections via new regulations protecting steep slopes, buffering wetlands and streams, and creating new zoning districts for sensitive areas. Creating an innovative agricultural preservation option via installment purchase agreements, IPAs, allowing farmers to compete with offers from developers. And that particular program was used, and it won awards all over the country for a way of funding, letting people continue to farm their land. Imposing an interim development ordinance that limited development to 1,500 permits a year while the general plan was being updated, not a moratorium. And that's the word that was plastered on everything I did from then on out by some people in the development community, that I had put a moratorium on building. And as much as we talked about it, and as much as the reporters corrected it, and as much as the editorials and the papers pointed it out, that word was out there, and it lasted beyond my lasting in the county executive race. Something I want to say here that's very personal, but it's very true. And the one good thing about losing that election is I don't think there's a prayer in hell that Lloyd and I would be married now. So it was a good deal. It really was. Okay, so the outcomes of this were the environmental regs that were adopted in 1988 brought the county into line with other jurisdictions in the region and reduced environmental impacts as intended. So at any rate, that was, I consider, the biggest accomplishment by far, no close second in my term in office, and it was clearly also the reason that I did not get reelected. So, another story. So we went up to New York City to see the bond rating agencies. And people from Public Works and Planning and Zoning really wanted me to go, and I'll say this as humbly as I can, I think because they knew I could hold a reasonably intelligent conversation about why we were doing what we were doing. And we got the first AAA bond rating in the history of Howard County. Wow. And when we went up there. So, let me see what else I need to do here, because I just can't possibly touch on all of the various issues. The arts were very important to me, and we strengthened the support for the arts. We bought the Rockland Arts Center, which was an old elementary school, and sitting without use. And if I had, in my wildest dreams, Grace, believed that that building would still be used, how many years later? 40, as the Arts Center. And we've of course done a lot more for the arts beyond that. But that building is still, is still there. So, what time is it? I have no idea what time it is.
Until 3.
Okay. So, I think I might stop and take questions. Let me see, just one more thing. No, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to let you bring up whatever you want to bring up about public policy that we may have done. See you, Calvin. Take care. So I'll be surprised if there aren't questions.
Liz,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about the impact that Columbia has had on Howard County and how that was integrated into the county over time?
Yes.
All the benefits.
What was that last part?
All
What
the
benefit?
benefits that we derive from that.
Well, for one thing, it was a planned community. And Rouse he provided school sites. The school sites were there, and what that man did in that community is possibly he did things just as admirable in other places in the country. And he was also a mentor of mine. But he would not let any of his employees make 1 cent of a campaign contribution. Can you believe that? No campaign contributions allowed from employees of the Rouse Company, which I think just speaks volumes about him. But he would call me into his office, or invite me into his office when he was still in the Rouse building, and say, "Don't let them get you down. Don't let them get." And I was doing a pretty good job on my own of not letting them get me down, but it sure felt good to hear it from him. So he planned not just the land, but he planned the facilities. He planned, spaces for senior centers. He planned the school sites. He planned the parks and provided the money for it. It was, I doubt, and I'm not knowledgeable. I'm far from a knowledge of a professional planner or what the history would be, but I would bet, Lori, it would be difficult to find another community that was planned to the extent that Jim Rouse planned this community here. And it's not perfect, I know that. And we're now, I think I don't need to state this position, but I will. I think the experience we've had with boundaries in our school system recently is just terribly sad that kind of an argument is going on here in this county. And he provided a place, the interfaith centers. He provided a place for the Women's Center, which was something started. I see Linda recognizes that. And he gave us space in one of those centers. I think it was the one in Slayton House, that we could go and use that, where the Women's Center, which was frequented by young moms. These were young women who had chosen to stay home with their kids and not go to work. And most of them were college educated. And they wanted to have the experience of communication, with other, and so that he just made it available to us for, at no charge. So it was an incredible place to live, an incredible place, and still is. I don't want to say just was, but we really have, hi, Maya, see you over there. We have work to do. You know, we can't, it is not, and of course it's not what it used to be. Nothing's what it used to be. And really we don't want it to be what it used to be. But we certainly have more we could do to have other places in our county and our state and our country be more humane, I think was the word I'd use. I just saw an isolated thing on this sheet of paper that I have here. I did not keep my papers as neat as I thought I would, Lloyd. But it's about the Patapsco Female Institute. And there was an item in the budget for years to restore the whole thing. But of course, you know, that never happened. What other questions? Yes?
Could you address how the tax base in Columbia, as it grew over time, how that impacted the rest of Howard County in terms of making it a very livable place?
You mean that those taxes were...
Repeat the question, please.
How did the tax base and the taxes that were raised from the development in Columbia impact, I think you're saying, the quality of life?
Benefit, yeah.
How did it
What Howard
benefit?
County had known and
Right, well, it was one place where we didn't have to buy school sites. And you know how acrimonious an issue that's become in our county. And, you know, the sites for the firehouse, all kinds of things were just donated. And then those services went to all of the residents. The services didn't stop at the borderline of Columbia. So it was a huge economic benefit. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about Centennial Park, which I think is one of your great accomplishments?
Thank you for that. Yes.
I've walked hundreds of miles there myself.
I didn't hear that. He asked about Centennial Park. What did,
I think it was one of your greatest accomplishments.
well, thank you. I like it pretty much myself. Yeah, and I love walking around it. And I love walking around, when you consider, within a mile's walk from where I live, in the townhouse, an out parcel in Harper's Choice. Not by choice did we pick an out parcel, but it was the house that I pick an out parcel, it was the house I wanted. But I can walk to Centennial Park, I can walk around the Little Patuxent Valley, I can walk to Wild Lake, I can walk to, what other lakes? So there's just a tremendous amount of passive, well, that's not passive, active recreation spaces available to us that comes from space. Now, Jim Rouse did not put aside the lake for Centennial Park. That was what the county did. And yes, it was something that we built out in the term that I was on the county council. As a matter of fact, Lloyd and I have a picture hanging in our family room, and we were colleagues on the county council at the time, and actually I had just won my election to be county executive, and he had just lost his election to be re-elected to the county council. And so I'm sitting in the boat, and you can tell I'm the one who's paddling along. Lloyd's there with his arms crossed and his feet propped up. For that he was finished, at least for the time. But he was immense. I'm not talking much about what I did in Annapolis for 20 years. It just would be, for one thing, I did not move up the ladder. I made a decision in my first year when I saw the way Annapolis operated that and I don't mean it was, as state governments go, it has been a pretty good one and certainly still is. But I was not willing to trade off votes on various issues in order to move up the ladder. I thought I could better use the knowledge I had because of my background, and so that's the way that I played that. So, anyway, what else? Anything else? Mm-hmm.
I remember decades ago when you were on the council, you described that there's going to be a limited access highway 29 from the Washington Beltway to 70, I think you may even describe it as a freeway. Howard County did its share. What went wrong with Montgomery?
Other than that, it went wrong. I don't know how to answer that. I hate to keep doing this story. I don't know if he knows that story. But if I ever did know it, and I probably did, I can't call it up now. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Did the person who took over after you get rid of that moratorium on building here in the county?
Well, there was no moratorium.
Right, but I mean,
There was no moratorium to
but I
get
mean,
rid
did
of.
they let everything go again like it had been before?
Well, I will answer it this way. I don't think that that county executive, who is no longer with us on this earth, I'm saying with absolute respect, I don't think he and his planning director did nearly as good a job for the people in the planning department, and I'll just say it. And so he did some other good things. I think he was a good man. But the pressure from people in the building industry, and I don't criticize them for that. I do not criticize them for that. If they start threatening, or if they start saying, I'll do this for you, or I'll do that for you, then yes, I will criticize that. But they're pushing as hard as they can to get what they want so they can make a maximum profit in their building. And that's what elected people are for, to be able to say no when it needs to be said. But it's, you have to be prepared to take the consequences. Anything else? Okay, well, I want to say one more,
One more question.
yeah.
Right back here? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know hindsight is 20/20,
Okay,
and I look at what's happening with the school system now, where they want to bus some of those kids to get free lunches to other schools, and that's kind of caused an uproar.
yeah.
And if we would have followed James Rouse's plan and made every developer put in a certain percentage of low-income housing, we would be in a better place. But you know what, it's never too late.
Well, I agree with you, nothing's
So
ever
if
too
right
late.
now, the planning board should say, if you're gonna build in Howard County anywhere, you have to put in a certain percentage of low-income housing, then maybe this problem will continue to erupt, and I just think that that would be a good plan. I think Jim Rouse has a great idea.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. So in closing, I want to say that one of my favorite places to go to now in retirement is the Historical Society in downtown. And I'm really serious about that. I'm learning so much more about this place. And when I haven't told, I think you heard the story of what Willie Flowers is doing with me for the first time just about half an hour ago. I'm very excited about this connection to Calvert County. And yeah, so it's a good life. It's a great life. I love being in public office. I love being out of public office. I love, living where I live. I love that there are so many places we can walk to, going out either our front or our back door. And I'm very grateful and want to live my life in a way that I can help create a better life for as many other people as possible, particularly those who can't do it for themselves. And